Dear listeners, I ask of you to close your eyes and imagine with me for a moment. Imagine a world where both the magical and mundane coexist in a post industrial boom, swinging to the roaring rhythm of big brass bandstands and even bigger businesses. Imagine a world where most of its residents live in giant stateside cities that protect them from the harsh outsides in their own isolated and self-sustaining biospherical walls, made from the hollow corpses of deities long expired. Imagine a world where the blood of those old gods is fuel for the new machines, where magic is constantly on the cusp of arcane advancements and being pushed further and further and further along the limits of what it means to cast a spell. An elite organization, known as the Bureau of Occultic Observations, stands ready and willing to bare their fangs against these threats and where their malice resides. Hello, everyone. It has certainly been a while, hasn't it? But I come with great joy, and I'm here to tell you, we're back, baby. All right. Well, I guess with all of that out of the way, there's really no use of me trying to stall the inevitable about this. So let me get everything back in place one more time. And perfect. Well, hello, everybody. As always, or for the first time tuning in, I am your hostess with the mostest, and your sadistic maniac for this evening, DapprWombat, and here I am. Welcome. Oh man, welcome to my first ever live stream / Q&A / I guess introduction / preview to everything. I see everybody coming in. Hello, everybody. Welcome. As you all can tell, I'm still a little nervous about this. Like I said, this is my first time streaming ever, or at the very least streaming on my own. So please bear in mind with me as I kind of work my way around how all of this stuff is going to work. So I will be a little slow to kind of reacting to stuff. So I just apologize, if there's some sort of technical issues. Again, I'm assuming as I get better with this, or as I do this more, it's just going to become more and more easier for me to do. So, with all of that out of the way, I am going to essentially kind of break down how this stream is going to work. I have a plan of this stream taking maybe about... Hey, thanks for the vote of confidence. LOS516. I'm guessing, or my estimate is that the stream should take no more than about 2 hours. The idea that I have is I'm going to use the first hour as the introduction, kind of like with all of this, any new announcements and updates for us for the Bureau, for Tales of Adventure, as well as just kind of giving a brief overview of like me and how I kind of got into this wonderful space. And then the last hour or 45 minutes of that will be for talking about what I've been kind of teasing on our Twitter at twitter.com at agents_of_boo is my revised fighter, and kind of getting a little bit more of an in-depth idea of my Tales of Adventure system that I have been using for the podcast and starting to kind of wanting to continuously develop. So, with all of that out of the way, I will essentially turn down this music just a little bit. I love that everybody's jamming out to this lo-fi. It's great. I'm just going to kind of tune this down just a little bit so I can hear myself think, so I don't get super distracted. But starting off with the introduction, like I said, I am King DapprWombat, or I am also DapprWombat. You can follow me on my Twitter of King DapprWombat or on my Instagram of Corrado Vermel. And as you can see, I am a African American male in this space, and I identify as he/him. Um, I got into this. I guess I got into TTRPGs as a whole um, a little later on in my years. How do I put this? I didn't growing up. Growing up, I didn't really know what like D&D was. I just kind of heard of that as something, something other people play. And I didn't really learn more about it until I was a junior in my high school, or junior in high school, and I watched for the very first time I believe it's the Penny Arcade, and I can't remember if it was PAX East or PAX West, but I saw for the very first time the original crew for Acquisitions Incorporated, back when D&D was still in 3.5 and before. I'm pretty sure this was definitely before 4E and definitely way before 5E came out. And I remember watching all of these people, play at this table and thinking, oh, this is something you can do? So this is just like a weird game that people can play. But like, it has this whole live event. There are people on stage cheering for them. And it's like, I don't know what's really going on, but like everything just seems so exciting. And that was essentially the first hook of tabletop role-playing games that got me. Over time, I made one of my friends that I made in high school invited me over to play at his house, and we and another group of friends essentially played 3.5. I tried first playing a Rat Folk Rogue, and I was like, rogues are fine, but we didn't kind of get a whole lot of. I didn't feel the flavor of it, and my first ever class that I truly fell in love with, which we'll kind of get into a little bit more later on, was a particular martial type class, and in specifics was part of one of the supplements from 3.5. I think you all kind of already guess which one it is, but like I said, I'm going to kind of save that a little bit more for the second half. So I played with them a little bit on and off. We just kind of had some silly games. It wasn't really anything serious. There's chaos abound. It was fun, but I was like, okay, cool. Well, I thought this was going to be a phase that I was going to eventually kind of peter out of. Then when I went to college, I went and I found a gaming club at my university, and I had met my college and still continuously on most of them still are my lifelong friends, and I met them through this gaming club. And originally I played 3.5, like I said, when at high school, but this is when two very interesting RPGs were introduced to me, and kind of how it developed in my process over time. I was introduced to the first edition of Pathfinder, and I was really intrigued of how it was like 3.5, but a little bit more streamlined. I was like, what? These are almost like the same system. How could this be? You know who it is. You know it, Shiza. You know it. And the second one that I absolutely fell in love with the world and just kind of the setting of it was Shadowrun. And I can't remember if it was particularly. I want to say it was 4th edition Shadowrun. And as of late, I've also been playing in 5th edition Shadowrun. But I fell in love with the world and how it advanced, and just like how magic and technology could kind of like coexist in this weird sort of balance, and just the weird dice system, and just how unique and different it was from anything else that I have ever played before. And I was all for, I didn't mind Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder because, for most of those were just playing in like fantasy worlds, which I didn't really mind. It's just over a while, I was like, these just kind of weren't my cup of tea. And I realized from that I really enjoyed playing in that space of urban fantasy and kind of taking that idea of like magic, modernized, or like a fantasy world that uses magic, kind of having more advanced technology, and that idea kind of always played in my head. And that was also when I played other games. Like this was back when I also played Fifth Edition for the first time, as well as when I played Star Wars: Edge of the Empire. That was a lot of fun. I played a Twi'lek rogue or smuggler. I can't remember their talent tree, but I know it was, the funny thing is that they were a Twi'lek stripper named Zulcha who was off looking for his girlfriend and looking for his wife that got kidnapped or smuggled. I fully can't remember, but that those two games essentially put me, and like just playing with the wonderful folks at my college, and like I said, some of them or most of them that I played with them back then are still my very, very good friends now. And especially like my two DMs that I have, they have shown me what it means to be a good DM by being a good listener and just by being a good active player of what to do and what not. And I also have to give props to them and great respect for not only dealing with my shit, my edgy dwarven brawler named Rygar, but also just kind of like helping to spark this interest and just wanting to tell these stories. And I stayed with this for a little while. It was college. I graduated. I got a degree in engineering technology with a come on, you can do this. You can do this, Wombat. With a specialization in alternative energy and renewable resources. And so originally, I wanted to essentially go work on wind and solar farms, get harnessed up and kind of climb up there. But when I got out of college, I went to go work for the airport over where I live. And, going to there is pretty good pay at that point. I wasn't necessarily sure of what I wanted to do next. And I guess that's kind of where things started to take a little bit more of a turn, so to speak. And I'm going to kind of dull down the music to kind of talk about this a little bit. I remember about 3 to 4 years ago, it was a September. I believe it was September 2018. I started noticing a dull, throbbing pain that was somewhere located in the center of my back. And it just seemed to keep getting worse and worse every day. And I went to physical therapy for a while, and it didn't really seem like anything was helping. It just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And by December of that year, around Christmas time, my family and I took a road trip to visit our relatives down south and to help clean out my late grandfather's garage. And I noticed that from my chest down, or from from about my chest down, everything felt really tingly. And it was almost kind of like the weird pins and needles sort of tingling, and almost everything that was kind of going numb. And it was a lot harder for me to walk, it was a lot harder for me to move around, and we didn't know what was going to be happening. We told the doctors what was the diagnosis. They said they wouldn't be able to see us until January. So we were thinking, okay, well, maybe we'll have to wait until January to go see the doctors. We had our Christmas, we came back up, and it was it was January. I want to say it was January 8th or January 11th, around one of those days, that I remember I was sitting in my bed, and I think I dropped something, or I was trying to get up and I dropped something, and I tried to go down to reach for it, and I fell, and I couldn't feel where my legs were. I just couldn't feel where they were in space to essentially kind of help prop myself back up. And it was at that point I had to have my parents kind of help me back up. Um, and at this point we're like, okay, no, we're going to go see a doctor. We're going to the urgent care and getting you an emergency X-ray to see what's going on, because it slowly started to show that the symptoms of whatever this was getting worse and worse. And so we went to the doctors. We went to the urgent aid. I went to go do an emergency X-ray, and by that point, I was pretty wheelchair bound, because it was just really hard for me to move around the expansive hospital. And I remember they took me into the emergency room, the room where you have the dramatization, or if you all have ever been, where you're rushed out of the ambulance and into the room to, for something, for trying to save you as fast as possible if there's someone who's like severely injured and anything like that. And I remember the doctor coming in, and I can't remember her name, unfortunately, for the life of me, but saying that they got the test results back and that they found a tumor the size of a golf ball on the left side of my spinal column, and that had eaten away my T5 vertebrae, as well as the connecting bone, joint, and tissue, or muscle, joint, and I believe a little bit of bone. So I apologize. Of that connecting tissue, and so I essentially have more floating ribs on my left side and my back, and then on my right. And the doctor essentially gave me a choice: either I let this tumor grow, and this will eventually crush my spinal column, and I would have to be paralyzed from the chest down, and I would have to live life like that. Or they do an emergency surgery. They remove the tumor. They put a artificial vertebrae in my in my T5, and put a cage between my T3 and my T7, and I relearn how to walk. And I felt pretty broken. Um, Especially because this was right when I was just right out of college. I was about 23 at the time, and I'm 27 now. And I was just kind of thinking, like, I don't want to go through this, but I don't really have much of a choice in the matter. And I opted for the surgery, and so they prepped me for the surgery, and I was in surgery, I believe, for about 14, maybe 16 hours, just kind of being under. And when I woke up, I was in hospital bed. They had my the robe on, and I had tubes coming out of my back to kind of help drain some of the stuff that happened. And I had this neat, straight lined, beautiful scar on my spinal column for that. Long story short, we slowly found out that the name of this tumor, after they took it to the lab to fully research it, and I also had I had a lesion on the left side of my left pectoral, like right about here. And they found out that I had a disease known as Rosai Dorfman. And for those that don't know what Rosai Dorfman is, I don't blame you. Rosai Dorfman is a orphan disease, meaning that I believe there are only 100,000 known cases, and it works like a blood cancer, but it's not malignant. So, in the sense of that, you can have these random spots appear in your body, but they don't spread and they don't travel like a normal cancer as it kind of takes over your cells. It just kind of grows and grows in that one space. And originally, the plan was for me to take oral tablet medication to help combat this because they thought I had a genetic switcher. Turns out that the oral medication wasn't able to do a whole lot, and so they had to prep me for IV chemotherapy. And so I also have a port scar on my right side that kind of cuts across through here, as well as a scar on my neck for where they had to feed the rubber tube tied to the IV port. And I essentially had to do chemotherapy for about a year because this was when I was diagnosed right. Well, I had to do my chemotherapy, the IV chemotherapy, um, essentially a month, or no, this was in June. So this was the June of when the first wave of the pandemic hit. So this was like before, well, I guess this was the when the pandemic hit. So in the middle of this. And so, I had to do chemotherapy every twice every month. I had to go for 5 days, and for the full week. And each chemo session was at least about 2 to 3 hours. And I remember just feeling so sick, so tired, so depressed about everything. And more importantly, I was scared that this chemo or this treatment was going to kill me. And especially during the time of the of going on with everything and the great sickness that happened, I was afraid that I was going to catch something with my immune system being so weak that that I was just gonna die. Essentially, I was gonna die of complications. I was gonna get too sick. There were some instances when my white blood cell count was really insanely low, and I caught fevers, and I would be in the hospital. I would be hospitalized for 4 days because my temperature just wouldn't go down because I just was so my body was just trying to deal with so much. And I remember the days that I had mental breakdowns and just sobbing. It just was not in a good place. And I kind of thought to myself, I was like, okay, well, I know, Wombat, I know you're feeling bad now, but what is some way that we can essentially take control of this situation? And so I got into doing a little bit more physical activity. I know it doesn't really seem like it, but I'm trying to get better with it. Because all I could really do was just do a lot of walking, do a lot of cardio stuff because I couldn't lift anything over 5 pounds of doing my chemo. And what ended up actually happening and what ended up saving me or giving me this idea, and I kind of tie everything back to it, is I wanted to do something more with these TTRPGs and tabletops and playing these games because that was where I found a lot of my solace, where I found a lot of my peace, because I could just not worry about things that were happening to me here. And I could go off and I could go have an adventure in a world where I do have a say and where I do have a semblance of control. And it was an anchor for me. I like if it wasn't for my family and for my friends and for tabletop role playing games, I would have been a lot worse off. And that's kind of where got the idea and thinking that, well, I like these games and fantasy is fun, but a lot of the games that I saw, especially this was kind of during the time of Critical Role and everything, um, a lot of the games I saw, they didn't star a lot of people who looked like me, or at the very least, I didn't see a whole lot of streams and games hosted by people who look like me, who have the same complexion as I do, and I kind of thought about it, and I was like, you know what, I essentially want to change that. And originally, it was going to be a blog called "Reality is a Social Construct," but then I found out that I am a much better speaker than I am a writer. I cannot write. I cannot write eloquently to save my life, and I realized that maybe I might try my hand at podcasting. And Agents of Boo essentially sort of came about from this idea because I wanted to do something different. I wanted to have it some take place in something more of like modern magic. So, I wanted to do like spells and guns and like blue collar wizards chasing down and like all that other goodness. And because I also wanted to do this was something that interests me. I am a nerd by heart, so this was basically like my love letter to reading comic books like Hellboy, or like watching the movies, and then also reading the comics for like the Men in Black series. And then also like learning more about kind of like how The Witcher is. And I just wanted to do something different. I wanted to make my mark and do something like yeah, actually. So this was actually the first attempt. So for all of you that are watching this, the levels 1 through 10 for the current run of Agents of Boo, that is actually my third attempt at creating this podcast. The first attempt was because I found the epic levels from Legacy TC Gaming. I'm pretty sure that's what they're called. And I wanted to do some fun. I was like, yeah, let's do level 0 through 30. And that was, when we were all starting out, and we ran into a ton of issues, audio cost, production cost. By this point, I was still on short-term disability, so I wasn't really able to make a whole lot of money. I was getting my stipulations from my work and everything like that, and it just wasn't enough. And not only that, but trying to get scheduling done, trying to get everybody to kind of collaborate, and just trying to figure all this out. And after we finished up our season 1, we just found that at the very least for our cast, it just wasn't sustainable anymore, and so we just couldn't do it. And so I was very sad about that, but I was like, you know what? No, it's okay. It's okay. Let's try it a second time. And we did the same exact thing. We had a little bit better of a plan, better idea. And the second time was just kind of dead on arrival, because that the biggest thing was trying to get people who are committed and, being able to just kind of schedule stuff. And it wasn't until recently that I was able to find the amazing cast that you all hear now for the modern, or the third version of Agents of Boo, that we have gone in so many more leaps and bounds than we did previously. And I have to give props where props are due. I don't know if they are still in the chat. But Nikki, for Beholder to No One, I have to give a massive shout out, because our podcast would not be the same. We would not be anywhere that we are today if it wasn't for Nikki's amazing talents, and just her amazing talents of like tips and tricks of like audio yes, you know who exactly, you know who you are. She is the absolute bestest, and without her, this would have been so much more of an uphill battle. And especially like with meeting Nikki, with meeting Spider Mike for Tales of Asperian, and just meeting all of these other wonderful people that have opened up the avenues, with especially like with I know I also have them in the chat. I think they're still in the chat here. With Spellburn, like meeting them and just kind of interacting with people via Twitter and just kind of like getting to know more of these wonderful people in this space. And now even of recently of me having the privilege and the absolute honor of being a part of the Play Nerd Allies charity streams for the Foundation for Inclusivity in Gaming, which is something that for not only for people of color but also members of the LGBTQA community. And that's like amazing. Like I just recently stepped into this space and all these wonderful people are doing all these wonderful things, and just I'm so blessed. As frustrated as frustrated as Nikki knows, as I get with just kind of the audio and just kind of like beating my brain up and trying to silence the goblin. I'm blessed each and every day to meet all of these wonderful people and to help us grow the brand that we have now. Like before I met Souls Rolls, you can also find him on Twitter. They are amazing, and both he and Nikki helped us out tremendously with our marketing and getting our social media stuff out there. And as I have checked, we went from having maybe about 50 or so people listening to maybe back in maybe about April to essentially last time I checked about 327 followers on our Twitter alone. And that's huge for us. It's no big numbers like 1,000 followers and whatnot, but just having that amount of engagement and growth in that short amount of time shows that like there is a place for us, that there is that there is something for us there. And I'm so happy and fortunate to be a part of this and to essentially share the wonderful ideas of Tales of Venture, Agents of Boo with everybody. And I guess this will kind of bring me into my next phase for the announcements. So I know that they will be getting here slowly but surely. But as we're kind of going into this, and as we on this rendition of Agents of Boo are finishing up and working behind the scenes to kind of get all of you wonderful people more of our content, to get our editing, to get our episodes out to you all, I decided I kind of wanted to do a little bit more, and I wanted to essentially kind of branch out and show what Agents of Boo could really do. So, in the near future, so be looking out for this as I kind of post it on our Twitter. You'll see it down scrolling along there. Um, I wanted to start actually writing our very own homebrewed content, and not only necessarily just for the fifth edition system in general, because I really enjoy fifth edition. It's just a very modular system that I can kind of use to make it my own, but to also slowly start to introduce our very own tales of adventure, or trait or working title TM, so to speak, TTRPG system. And what a better way to do that than to slowly show how the system grows as our podcast grows. And being a part of everybody, just knowing all of these amazing people has been so it's been so amazing. And I just want to say to everybody everybody who's here, thank you for showing up for this. Like I said, I was super nervous about doing all of this, and thank you for those out there. Just thank you for being a part. Thank you for having us in your lives, and thank you for um basically just like enjoying the stuff that we kind of put out. So, with all that being said, I will be putting out not only some more homebrew content sometime soon. I'm still trying to work out the details for that and trying to figure out when I would have enough time to do so in my schedule, as well as you will see me a little bit more on be kind of in other people's games when I get a chance to kind of pop in. Definitely be a part of the Play Nerd Allies and their charity streams as long as they'll have me. And wanting to get back into giving to you all and kind of getting a little bit more of my face and our message out there of just making reality what you want it to be. And within the TTRPG space and like diversifying your ideas with everything. And so I think maybe in the next couple of months I have to get a full breakdown of when this is going to be, but I want to actually start making or yeah, I want to start making YouTube videos again. So that way I can kind of have my own little like Wombats workshops sort of thing. Um that way I can kind of share some of my interesting ideas, some of my, other cool homebrew stuff that I was thinking of, maybe like homebrew monsters, items. I'm not really sure as of yet, but I kind of have 8% of a plan so far. Sometimes is all you need. As well as I also want to use for Agents or for Tales of Adventure our platform to help boost up other POC LGBTQA plus creators in the TTRPG space, and so I'll be reaching out to a couple other wonderful people, and I would love to be able to not only review what they have, if they'll allow me, I would not only love to review what they have in store and what their beautiful creations have, but also to learn about their journeys and to share their journeys with you all and maybe doing some fun like interviewing sort of thing. Because I realized I love talking to people more than I love hearing the sound of my own voice. But man, I sure do love hearing the sound of my own voice. So, like I said, please look out for those in the future. We will definitely be talking more and more about that as we essentially go along. And as well as that, hopefully, if we're getting set up with our third party content, thinking about posting things to maybe like a DM's Guild or Drive Through RPG, that would be stuff specifically for 5th edition that people would be able to either starting off with a pay what you want to kind of like pick and choose and see, how this all how this fits into your world or how you all think that you might change it, as well as maybe putting more of our own spin, our Tales of Adventure TTRPG system on other things, like maybe, hopefully getting to the point where we would be able to get a Patreon and having more stuff for our coffee. And with that being said, I don't have anything to show as of yet, but we have some pretty good I don't want to reveal it too much, but we have a really cool lot of really cool stuff in the mix. I think I kind of teased one of the little things in a post way back, but we actually have started production on a couple of like D&D related things, and they should be getting here to my new place. Oh yeah, also by the way, this before I get I have been successful and I have been fortunate enough to be able to move to find some place I'd be able to make our own, and so I'm now also live streaming this in my new apartment bedroom, and that's also like really awesome. And so I don't want to spoil too many of the details, but once our inventory kind of gets here, we'll be posting this more and more on our Twitter page about maybe doing some sort of sweepstakes. But that'll have to that'll essentially kind of have to hold off once I'm able to actually get a lot of the product stuff. So I don't. So that's still also a little bit hush hush, but don't worry, it's coming soon, y'all. I trust me. What else? I apologize. I think I kind of got on a little bit of a rant. I wanted to kind of keep this a little bit more structured, so that way I tried so hard not to go on a full rant, but it just sort of happens like that. I'm talking to you all, but man, I sure am in my room talking to a camera for about 45 minutes. Um, well, I guess then I will use this as a transaction or as a transition rather to talking about the essentially like a fifth our TTRPG system of our own, and then I can talk about okay, cool, got this. Good job, Wombat. Um, so our system as right? I never rant. What I'm so I always I always know exactly what to say at the right moment, and my brain doesn't need like 5 or 6 synapse firings to figure out what it needs to say next. Just dude, trust me, trust me. Oh yes, as I distract myself, the Tales of Adventure TTRPG system. So the idea that I had with this, and I have to give credit where credit is due. I have to give a big shout out to the inspiration find it for Jiffy Glyphs. You'll be able to find them on their Twitter sphere, as well as they have their own website, and in particular the module. Excuse me, the module that I'm talking about them for in specifics is the Darker Dungeons module. And I really enjoyed that concept, not only because it did a lot of really cool things that I love to see, like modding or just third party content in the 5th edition system, because of how simple it is that you can just kind of build off stuff like this. But that they did something that I never thought you could just do. I never thought this was just allowed in the rule books of a D20 system. And essentially, instead of it being you go from levels 1 to 20, you go from levels 1 to 10. And I was just like, what? I saw this and I was like, that's never. It's like, what? You can just do this? Like, you can just break the rules like that? And it's like, well, yeah, apparently you can. And once you know the rules, you can just kind of make reality the way you want it to be. And it really interests me because I know in my personal experience, I have never been able to play a game um, past level. I think even in past, like my more I have the most experience in Pathfinder, and I have been more kind of I wouldn't say a forever DM in the 5th edition space, but I have been taking more of a DM role in 5th edition. But I have never played past a game that was, or gotten to a point of a game that is a level 20. I think all of the time we've stopped maybe between level 13 and level 15. And I was like, okay, I don't get all the cool stuff, but that's fine. And as I kind of did more and more of my research to see if this was just kind of the outlier for our games, a lot of the feedback I saw was that yeah, a lot of people, or I wouldn't say a lot of people, maybe a good chunk of people were like, yeah, we've never gotten past that point either. And it was just because at some point or another, the the encounters have to get incredibly wacky in order for it to feel more balanced. And at that point, the abilities also just kind of go off the rails, because at that point it's like, ah man, like all bets are off when you pass level 15 or whatever, because you're getting into the late game. And I was like, okay, well, what if I made a system, kind of basing that idea off of Jiffy Glyphs of the 10 level system? What if I took the motto of more quality, less quantity? So, what can I do to essentially kind of condense all of that? And so that's kind of where I took a lot of inspiration from 5th edition, like I said, from Jiffy Glyphs, like I said, but also as of recently for Pathfinder 2nd edition. And more specifically, their ancestry feats and or their ancestry system and how that kind of works. And in particular for that once you pick your specific ancestry, you also get an additional number of hit points specific for that ancestry. So maybe like if you are an elf, you get 8 additional hit points. If you're a orc, you get 10. You know, if you're a dwarf, you get 10 or whatever. But nobody has more than 10, and nobody has less than 8. And I figured, oh, well, this would actually be a pretty good system in place, especially because I'm using those 10 levels and wanting to make them feel more special. So I could have a moment where you are playing like a level 0 character. And I was like, well, wait a minute. If I do that, I'm still kind of running into the risk of, yeah, sure, you get your additional HP because of your ancestry, but like that's only maybe 10 or so HP. So that's still starting off at like level 1 without having some of your stuff. And what I also took a lot of inspiration from Jiffy Glyph was having your backgrounds mean something, or I guess having your backgrounds mean something more. For those of you who aren't aware, for 5th edition, there you have your different backgrounds. So like guild artisan, folk hero, soldier, spy, urchin, I already said guild artisan, outlander, and different stuff like that. And it's really cool. They give you like different proficiency bonuses to things. They give you like proficiency in different tools and everything like that, and giving you like a base personality. And I'm like, yeah, this is great. And then besides the skills, that's kind of really the only thing a lot of people use them for. And I think it's just because of a design aspect from having 20 levels. You can't focus on just the background itself because you're getting all of your major power from those 20 levels. And for this system, I wanted it to feel more personal. I wanted it to feel more impactful and sincere in the matter of, no, there is a very stark difference between a character who is a level 0, who just has their background like a soldier, and like uh, a warblade. Using this as a great example for a tease, that not only, sure, you have your background as a soldier and you get your other stuff and you get like your additional, you would be able to get like additional health points, additional saving throws, maybe like that's when you get like your proficiency bonus for +1. But like once you get that first level in fighter, it's like, oh, this is what really separates people. And I was always kind of sad how there was really that gloss over in game design. Like I said, I understand that trying to get from levels 1 to 20 is the main thing. But I always was kind of upset that there was no fantasy in the fact of like people awakening to their new abilities, right? Like it's the idea that in a traditional 5th edition or a traditional D&D game, you may have like a level 1 druid and they're like, oh yeah, I can kind of do all of this stuff too. And it's like, oh yeah, I can do that. But like, think about it from a perspective from a person who was an outlander, who was good and surviving in the woods, and something happens to them where they are now granted the very powers of nature to speak to the ley lines of that druidic force, or a or a soldier, or maybe even like a god, what is it called, it's the cleric one, the cloistered. I think that's the only thing I can kind of come. My brain is kind of frizzing out a little bit. But like, someone who is cloistered, who spent most of their years in devout prayer, acolyte. That is the word. An acolyte in devout prayer, and staying true to their path, to then suddenly be chosen as their deity's ambassador onto the mortal realm, as either a cleric or a paladin. Like, how much of a jump and how impactful that initial needs to be. And so I've also kind of buffed a lot of the classes, even though I kind of cut them in half. And from a design standpoint, sure, you only have 10, sure, you only have 10 rolls of like getting your max HP at 10th level. But my added padding, I suppose, is that you're not necessarily weak in HP in the beginning, especially like if you wanted to run a level 0 or like a 0 level campaign. You could actually run a couple of sessions of that, because not only would you have some traits from your ancestry and also your background, but you would get your starting HP from your ancestry as well as additional HP from your background. So let's say if you wanted to be a elf, I don't know, an elf urchin or something like that, the elf would have 8 HP, and then the urchin has, I think I put it on 6 plus their Constitution modifier. And so even if you had a 0 Constitution modifier, that's 6. That's already, as I'm doing math so I don't embarrass myself on stream, that's already 14 hit points right off the bat. So it definitely makes your character a lot more hardier. And I kind of like this idea because, again, this is also a more dangerous world. This is a world where both magic and technology, so fireballs and guns, exist in this world. So you can also you get fried, you can get shot, as well as working on a system that kind of makes the monster or the creatures that you interact with more nuanced, as they kind of want to feel more like a puzzle and a part of the world. And I really wanted to focus on that idea, that there is so much of a leap between these two, and that it shows how far your player character, your character, has come along. And even then, I wanted to make the system as modular as I could, in order to have it where, like, hey, you could play a class that works like this, or you could play a class that works like this. And excuse me, not only is it that you have your different choices at your archetypes, which in this system, people would get their archetypes, they would get their beneficial archetypes, and stuff wouldn't really kick in until about 3rd level, but you would get your archetype stuff at 1st level. And so that kind of gives a little bit more of that specialization to it. Not enough to overwhelm new players, but just enough to kind of give a little bit of an idea, a little bit of a dip of what they're going to be doing, just to kind of not waste any time with that. And not only that, but once you do choose your class, you also get an ability score increase based upon that class. So let's say take for example for a paladin, you have the choice, you have essentially like 9 choices to make. You have 3 choices to either boost your strength, your charisma, your constitution, or whatnot. So to have more modularness or customization for your character, kind of making them a little bit more of what you want them to be. So I think with all of that being said, as just kind of me going on and rambling about this, I surprised myself. I'm actually about like 2 minutes early on this. But I think I am actually going to kick it over, and I'm going to share my screen. Let me make sure I have everything up and correct, so please bear with me for but a moment. Yeah, everything essentially kind of looks good for here. So unfortunately I am doing this on my laptop. I'm not fancy enough nor high tech enough just yet to have a dual monitor. So I will try my best to read some of the comments, but if I don't see any of them, I do apologize. But I think I will actually be able to switch this over and share my screen to show what I have been kind of working on for the my revised fighter, the Warblade. And I'll kind of break down some of my ideas. Mind you, keep in mind, all of this is still a very much a work in progress. I took a lot of inspiration from, like I said, from Jiffy Glyphs, also from like the Advanced 5e that came out, and just kind of like wanting to make this a bit more modular as a system. So please, I'm only going to be going through the base class because I don't know how the archetypes are going to work just yet. So we're just only looking at the base class, base classes, or excuse me, the base class, and I'll just kind of walk through all of that. So without further ado, let me go ahead and share my screen for that. So please give me one moment. All right. So as you all can see, this is essentially just kind of, I have this as a Google Doc. I just wanted to keep it something simple, something clean. This has absolutely no formatting to it. This is just kind of me putting it in words in the ways that I could. And you all will see that obviously this is the fighter, but I have named it the Warblade. As going back to my story in the beginning, the first class that I ever fell in love with was a class called the Warblade from a supplement called the Book of the Nine Swords. And the thing that I loved about the Book of the Nine Swords was it gave so many more options to martial characters. And at the very least, I was always kind of upset with the baseline fighter for 3.5 or for Pathfinder 2. At the very least, Pathfinder wanted to do something a little bit more with it, but that they just got bonus feats. And while that's not bad in itself, it just kind of made it pretty plain and made it was like, oh yeah, well, if I play a fighter or if I play a human fighter, I get 2 extra bonus. You know, you can, obviously it's more about making your character how you want them to be, but it just added no flavor, or especially for someone who had a hard time trying to pick out feats and choosing what I wanted to do. It didn't really appeal to me because that just seemed like if I could be all of these things, I could be none of these things. And when I picked up the Book of the Nine Swords, I flipped it over. I saw the Sword Sage. I saw the Midnight Sun. I think that's one of them. I have not picked up this book in forever, so I'm kind of drawing a blank with it. But I also found and fell in love with the Warblade. And this is essentially kind of a homage to that, as well as an homage to making that class a little bit more modular. So as we kind of go along, you see that this is the base class, it's the revised fighter. And as you can see, there are a couple of things that are pretty different here. For one, you can definitely see here that, well, this doesn't say 1d10. This says 1d12. And you're thinking, oh, well, that's insane. It's like, well, no, you are correct. I am putting this as a work in progress. I want to see how this would balance first. But I was okay with giving this version of the fighter, a 1d12 hit die, because I know when I get into my version of the Barbarian, the Juggernaut, they have ways that would still allow them to gain additional hit points. So it's not like the Warblade would be stepping on any of those toes. Plus, the Juggernaut has some also really cool abilities that I would love to show at like a previous stream. Who knows? Maybe if we hit maybe 600 followers on Twitter or something like that, I would love to do another stream like this and kind of show more of this stuff. But for it, I was like, you know what? I feel as though for them being a frontline tanky fighter, they need to have that hardier hit die. And I did this as well because I also felt like the D10 was kind of getting a little crowded. So basically, you have a breakdown of like the fighter and the barbarian, who are the ones who have the D12 hit die. Then you have the paladin and the ranger, who have the D10 hit die. Then you would have your cleric, come on, brain, your cleric, rogue, and monk, who have the D8 hit die, and then all the others, like the wizard, sorcerer, and everything, would have a D6. Again, just kind of scaling. It's like, well, if you and I also forgot the warlock, who would have a D8. Again, scaling this because you have the half casters, and then you have like the full casters, so they get lower, and so on and so forth. But that's essentially kind of what I wanted to do. That was my thought process on making it that they were able to get 1d12, roll a d12 plus their Constitution modifier, because it's like, well, D12s, they don't get a whole lot of love in this system. And I kind of want to get a use of being like, nah, you can roll your D12 for hit die and not just be a barbarian to do so. A lot of the stuff here for the proficiencies and whatnot hasn't changed, obviously, because you're a Warblade, you're a master at arms, so you are proficient with all armors and all manners of shields. In this system, if I'm able to get the calculations correct, the plan is that you would also have different types of shields, not necessarily like, the different like kite or heater shield, but you would have maybe like you could have a buckler or you could have a tower shield, and just kind of bringing back again that old school flavor from 3.5 and Pathfinder, because I love that different the different variants for that. And then once again, for for weapons, for basically all simple and all martial weapons, again, you are a fighter. This makes sense that you have to be, you have training in almost of these tools. That also means for martial weapons, this also means for firearms. Because again, this is a modern world, and so guns do exist in this world. They do maybe about a shotgun does about 2d8 piercing damage, but that's only 2d8. You don't get to add any of your dexterity modifier to it. I kind of treated them almost like a spell in that sort of sense. Like, unless you get a modification, you don't get to add really any, or unless the spell says so, you don't really get to add any of your ability modifier to it. That was just kind of the way I ruled it, because I allowed the firearms to do a lot more damage. So then you have tools, none. I'm thinking I might be changing that sometime soon. I just didn't know what else to kind of put for that there. Then for your saving throws, obviously you become proficient with strength and constitution saving throws. I'm thinking, and I want to see if this would be kind of interesting, of maybe also switching that up. I'm trying to debate whether or not I wanted to do for strength for sure, but giving a choice between constitution or wisdom to kind of show the idea of being a fighter who is either strong of body or strong of mind. But who knows? I may just have it where you are able to get proficiency bonus in maybe 2 to 3 of your saving throws. But that's kind of what I was thinking about for this. And lastly, before we kind of move on to the first level finally, is what you would all see here for skill focus. Now, there's a reason why this says skill focus instead of choosing from 3 skills. Skill focus essentially still works from choosing from whatever these skills, but the caveat is, and the really cool, interesting idea I wanted to make of this was skill focus is if your ancestry or your background, if you have proficiency in any of the skills that are listed for your skill focus, you also gain a +2 to that roll. Now, this isn't supposed to be anything that is supposed to be significant. This is just more of like your character becoming a bit more specialized in what they do. So you could have a character who is a farmhand, who has like a folk hero background, who decided to become a fighter. Is like, hey, I do have proficiency in animal handling. It's like, well, skill focus, you get to choose out of the 3 if they are in there. Then if you wanted to choose animal handling as one of your skill focuses, boom, you get a +2 to any roll that you would make on top of you being proficient with the skill. Now, this +2 it's just a flat +2. It doesn't stack with anything. It's just that +2 bonus. Just to give something a nice little buff to it. So, getting on down to it, we have first level, and you can see the first level kind of gives you a lot. I'm going to get into this, but the fighting styles are essentially how they normally work in 5th edition. So you have your fighting style, your resolve, your archetype feature, which I will not be getting into, and your maneuvers. That's right. I took a lot of inspiration from the Warblade as well as looking at other supplements. In particular, there was the Laser Llama Revised Fighter, and I absolutely loved that concept where basically, to me personally, the Battle Master was is the best fighter archetype only because this is really what people wanted to have a 5th edition Warblade, because the maneuvers essentially work the same way. Mind you, you didn't have your superiority dice, and you had like different levels of maneuvers. But to me, the superiority die was a very streamlined way of having these new options. And I think that's the thing that people really wanted for the fighter. Is like, sure, you can hit good and everything like that, but they wanted more options. They wanted the fighter to just be more than something of I run up and I hit the thing. And so I was like, you know what? Screw it. Every fighter is like, screw it. Fighters, fight or screw it. Warblades get maneuvers. And not only that, but depending on the archetype that you pick, you also get different maneuvers based on that archetype that don't conflict with any of the other maneuvers that you've already learned. Because again, this is your character making them how you want them to be. So I'll kind of go over this briefly, but the fighting styles, they're essentially pretty much unchained. So you get to choose one of the following. You can't stake a style option more than once, even if you get to choose again later. And so you have, archery, dueling, great weapon fighting, protection, two weapon fighting, unarmed fighting. So these are essentially kind of unchanged. I wanted to use the base ones because there's something fun that we'll get into it. Next up, we have Resolve. So, Resolve, at second level, your instruction expands its prowess in how you choose to defend yourself from bodily harm. You get to choose one of the following, and the one selected cannot be changed, and you cannot learn a new resolve. This feature is essentially supposed to replace the second wind feature. Not necessarily to say like, I didn't like second wind, I wanted to kind of toss it out, but more to be like making this type of fighter your own and kind of making that a little bit more unique, as I'll kind of get into it as I scroll down. So the first choice is called bulwarking. Essentially, when you are wearing medium or heavy armor and are subjected to a melee or ranged attack, you can spend your reaction to reduce the damage you take by 1d10 plus your Warblade level. You can use this feature twice, and once you use this feature, you must finish a long rest before you can use it again. So, bulwarking is essentially my idea of a heavy ironclad Warblade, that they are decked up in heavy armor, and that their whole idea is that they can run in and that they can take damage and keep going. And I really like this idea of them using their instruction or using their tutelage to use the armor to absorb most of that impact. So that's why I put this as you get to reduce the damage instead of this being a complete adding a complete bonus to your AC. Where no, like this is for those who are like, no, I want to wear full plate. I want to have a two-handed sword, and I just want to go, and it allows you to do so. Not only that, but then if you also have something else, maybe like a item or another special ability due to your archetype, that also frees up your bonus action. As like I said, it says there it's a reaction, so you are able to, or rather, you don't get to waste any of your bonus action to do any of this. Now, again, you only get to use this feature twice, and once you use all of them, you don't get them back to a long rest. That's just essentially to make sure that people don't, keep essentially sort of spamming this idea. And as we kind of go along, it says when you are at 8th level, so this also, and that's another thing I wanted to do. I wanted to take these systems that were in place, but also have a more advanced version once you level up. Because again, I really like the idea that the class abilities should not work within their own space. And I mean that by in their own vacuum. If you are truly advancing in a class, you should have starting abilities that grow with you. And that show, no, I have learned how to do this. I have learned how to master this, and we'll get more and more into this as this kind of comes along. And that's why I really loved reworking this. But at eighth level, when you roll initiative and you have less than one, if you have less than half of your total maximum hit points, you regain one use of this feature. So this is basically being like, oh, if you're going into a fight and you're like, oh man, I have like half my HP left, you roll initiative, boom, you get to use that level of resolve. You get to have one use of that resolve again. This is essentially supposed to be a somewhat like get out of jail. No one says get out of jail free card, but essentially a thing that kind of like give you that last bulwark. Like you just need a little something in order to help take your opponents down faster before they take you down. So going down with it, we have deflection. So while you are wearing a shield and you are subjected to a melee or ranged attack, you can spend your reaction to add your proficiency bonus to your AC, potentially causing the attack to miss and hit your armor. So this is more of the idea of like, no, this is me deflecting it. And I wanted to use this as the shield because, at the very least, for me and my understanding of the mechanics of shield, that is what they are supposed to do. Shields are designed to deflect blows away from the body. The armor is supposed to absorb any hits that you would take. And so I wanted to kind of get that use of the shield again to make it like, no, you could have a sword and board fighter or sword and board Warblade that is able to use that shield, and you're able to like deflect and move those, and like making your shield something that you can use that's a part of you, a part of your arsenal, instead of just being like, I get a flat +2 bonus. Yay. And again, you can use this feature twice. Once you use it, you can long rest. And again, when you roll initiative, you have less than your total maximum hit points. You regain one use of this feature. Now, going down, this is where we get respite. So, respite is essentially second wind. This is for the fighters who are like, you know what, I don't really need any, or this is for the Warblades who are like, you know what, I don't really need anything for my bonus action. I think everything like is good. I'm just gonna heal up. And this is you taking that break, that moment in combat to be like, all right, focus up. I gotta take a deep breath. And this is your healing. Again, this still works as it's a bonus action, but instead of it being just a flat roll, it's actually 2 rolls of your hit die plus half your level. So regardless if you roll a 12 on your first die and a 1 on your second die, if you are still a Warblade level 3, that's still 18 HP that you get back. And again, but for this one, you can also use this feature twice. So this is again trying to give you that respite of like, no, I just need to catch my breath for a minute and be like, all right, I'm good. And as always, use it twice, long rest, and then whenever you roll initiative at 8th level, whenever you roll initiative, you have less than your maximum hit points, you regain a use of this feature. Sound good, everybody? All right. Now I'm going to be moving on into the maneuvers. So how this works, and especially because of how the Warblade gets a lot of other really cool stuff, I limited the maneuver use. Essentially, you have uses of maneuvers. They work like maneuver dice. It's just more in the line of like, you only get a good selection of maneuvers. So you learn 2 maneuvers, and you get 1 additional at 3rd, 6th, and 9th level for a total of 5. And each time you learn a new one, you can replace a maneuver with a different one, as well as you also get your superiority die. Your superiority die increases from a D8 to a D10 at 4th level, and a D10 to a D12 at 9th level. So it takes longer for that superiority die to upgrade itself, but oh, buddy, you get a D12, like you get a D12 for a maneuver die. That's supposed to be something that's absolutely insane. And again, it's supposed to make sense at 9th level, because that's almost when you're getting to the be-all, end-all cap of your class. So, getting down and going down to it, you have your superiority die, which you have 4 starting out, which are your d8s. And once you expend it when you use it, and you regain all of them when you finish a short or long rest, and you gain another superiority die at 7th level for a total of 5. So no matter what, you can only have 5 superiority die at a time. I kind of thought of this like the again, like with the maneuvers for the 3.5 Warblade, but also took some inspiration from the Slay the Spire and some other deck like deck roguelike deck building games. There we go. Where you only have the 5 because they work like 5 cards in your hand. And so you can only play these cards in your hand every short or long rest. So, second level is when we get our Action Surge and our Battle Harden. And I'll explain what Battle Harden does in a second. So, Action Surge still works the same. You essentially take 1 additional action on your turn and a bonus action, and you can only use this feature once, and you regain it on a short or long rest. However, at 9th level, when you deal damage to a creature equal to 25 or above on a single attack, you immediately regain 1 use of your Action Surge. So this is to be like, no, like I do this amount of damage. This is kind of the reward of like, I got my, my combat second wind, so to speak. So this kind of encourages your character to essentially kind of keep going and attacking to get damage. And just to kind of keep going with it. Battle Harden is what I essentially took inspiration from the Advanced 5th Edition. I looked at it, I didn't really enjoy the exploration knacks, but I really loved how they wanted to add more interesting stuff to the fighter to essentially have them do more stuff outside of combat. And I thought that was a really cool idea. I wanted to kind of add into this system as well. So these are still kind of like works in progress. I haven't had a chance to kind of take a look at this stuff, but essentially you have closed gaze. So basically, like you're a mask. Nobody can tell what you're thinking, and so people have disadvantage on making insight checks against you because you're just very, very hard to read. Then you have Dangerous Aura, which is more of like if you want to get into playing more of like a guts / berserk / I don't want to say like angsty swordsman, but playing more of a dangerous character. You essentially have this fear aura that you can just kind of like subject people to. Mind you, they still have to make a wisdom saving throw, so this could also always backfire on you. Just kind of depends. But they suffer disadvantage on their first roll against you. And they also may choose to just abandon the attempt of whatever they were trying to do. So like if your fighter, if your Warblade gets into an altercation, like someone in the bar is being like, what? You're challenging me? And like all of their other buddies show up, Dangerous Aura, that causes them to kind of back off pretty quickly. Again, they have a wisdom saving throw they get to make, but that's neither here nor there. And then Watchful Eye. This is more in kin with basically being alert, being kind of a watcher, being a soldier on guard. And so you would have advantage on insight checks to determine the hostile intent or to predict violence that would be going on. And as well as you get to add a +5 to your passive wisdom perception to just notice the area around you. You are so hyper tuned to the dangers around you that you just passively have a better insight. This is supposed to be kind of your spidey sense in a way. Then we have your third level, which you only get your burst of strength. And essentially your burst of strength is whenever you make your dexterity check, you may choose to add your proficiency bonus to the roll. And once you use this feature, you can use a shorter rest. This is essentially something that kind of gives you a little bit more of a buff. Again, because the Warblade is going to be more of a physical fighter. They have the choice of either using their strength or their dexterity. Or anytime they make one of those, they have a choice to adding their proficiency bonus. Just to kind of give them a little bit more of a leg up than anything. Character improvement is essentially what your what your ability score increase is essentially working still. There are a couple other things that I wanted to change, but that's going to have to be another stream for another day. Then we get into the fun stuff for 5th level. At 5th level, you get something called Student of War and Weapon Expertise. So, Student of War, this tells you that at the beginning of 5th level, you can attack twice instead of once whenever you make the attack action on your turn. So, no big deal. This is what typically most martial characters get at 5th level, just to kind of give them a little bit of a buff in, a little bit of a boon in everything. But the interesting thing about it is, in addition, when you roll initiative and you have none of your superiority die remaining, you regain 1 die. So again, this is the fact of like the Warblade getting ready for a fight. Even if they are broken and battered, they're always ready to go. No matter what, there's always something that they are ready to go and ready to do. Weapon expertise, I thought would be a fun idea. And I came across this idea because I saw the 5th edition feats of Slasher, Piercer, and Crusher. And I thought, oh man, these are some really cool weapon ideas, but like I'm just kind of sad that nobody really thinks about them. And I was like, well, why don't I take those feats ideas and again, kind of paying homage to the bonus feat, like the bonus feats that the 3.5 and Pathfinder Fighter would get. Why don't I just kind of make that and make this a little bit more its own? So weapon expertise basically says that you're proficient with your skill. Your proficiency in skill with your signature weapon is honed to a masterful precision. So you get to choose one of the following, and it essentially follows it for each weapon type. You have Armor Breaker, which is for piercing weapons that deal piercing damage. So this would be anytime you fight with a weapon that deals piercing damage. Felling Hammer is for attacks that or weapons that deal bludgeoning damage. So anytime you would fight with a club, a quarterstaff, a warhammer, Felling Hammer. And Deep Cut is anything with a slashing damage. Obviously, like a scythe, short sword, long sword. You know the drill by now. But you essentially get to choose one of the following actions that you're able to do once per turn. So for Armor Breaker, once per turn, when you hit a creature that with an attack that deals piercing damage, you can re-roll one of the attack's damage die, and you must use a new roll even if it's a 1. This is again the idea of you being able to puncture and penetrate through your target's armor. So that's more of the idea of like, you get to re-roll this die to kind of do a little bit more damage, to be like, oh no, thematically, you're so honed in skill that you're able to still, even if it's a little bit harder to do, you still manage to puncture through and find the crack in the armor. Felling Hammer, once per turn, when you hit a creature with an attack. And for at 8th level, for Armor Breaker, whenever you score a critical hit that deals piercing damage to a creature, you reduce that creature's AC by 3 until the start of your next turn. Again, this is going into the fact of like you crit, you hit, and your skill with that weapon is so advanced that you're able to disable and exploit your opponent's weakness, albeit for a short while. Next up, we have Felling Hammer. Once per turn, when you hit a creature with an attack that deals bludgeoning damage, you can move it 5 feet to an unoccupied space, provided the target is no more than 1 size larger than you. Much like following the way of Crusher from the feat, this is essentially using your mighty bludgeoning damage to just knock foes around the battlefield. Mind you, it's only about 5 feet, but this is still kind of a nice way to help clear some of the lines and getting people out of the way. This is more for using a lot of that combat control. And again, this is like a hammer, so you are essentially swinging this thing around and you smack somebody so good that you push them back. And at 8th level, when you score a critical hit that deals bludgeoning damage to a creature, attack rolls against that creature are made with advantage until the start of their next turn. So this is essentially like you smacking them on the head so good that it leaves them momentarily dazed. Again, with your signature prowess at 8th level with this mastery of this weapon. And last but not least, we have Deep Cut. Once per turn, when you hit a creature with an attack that deals slashing damage, you can reduce the speed of the target by 10 feet until the start of their turn. So, again, this is you being able to use your blade and positioning where you need it to go. So this is this is probably like you parrying and you cutting low and like cutting your opponent's tendon or something like that. Doing something that you can to reduce their speed for a short amount of time. And at 8th level, when you score a critical hit that deals slashing damage to a creature, you grievously wound it, and until the start of your next turn, the target has disadvantage on all attack rolls. So this is more of you slicing them real good that you give them like a good hindrance. Thematically, this could be something in the way of your character of causing this creature to bleed out. And again, these only activate at 8th level and on critical hits. So it gives more excitement to it, right? Because like, oh, I get a critical hit. It's like, boom, with your mighty hammer, you slam your it's like you slam your hammer into the chest of the Behir, and so powerfully that you have knocked it off balance and have given the rest of your teammates pose and an area to strike, and kind of giving it a little bit more flavor. I just like the flavor of it. Then we move on to 6th level, which is Warlore and your advanced fighting style. That's right, folks. I again going into the fact of wanting these abilities to kind of tie back into one another. I decided at 6th level that you would essentially get a more buffed version of your fighting style that you chose. Again, to show how your mastery in the arts of war are becoming much more impressive. But Warlore, again, has that lovely idea of giving your Warblade more flavor. And so they have essentially kind of a couple options. You have Arms Merchant, which basically means that um, you're always able to find places to trade weapons and armor, and you always double your proficiency bonus to intelligence check to estimate the value of weapons and armor, and gain advantage in all charisma checks to barter and such goods. So you know your craftsmanship to a T, that you know the price. You can take a really good guess and know the price of what this armor should be. Or like talking shop with the blacksmith to be like, hey, having the charisma to buy those items. So again, this kind of makes it where if you decide to choose this kind of makes it more fun and interesting, because that allows your Warblade to kind of have a little bit more dialogue, be a little bit more social than probably like a normal fighter just wouldn't have the built-in class abilities to do so. Next up, you have Evaluate Technique. So this is essentially for your Warblades that are like, no, I'm all about honing the skill and like wanting to test my opponents. And this is, as a bonus action, you can make an insight check to evaluate a creature's combat capabilities. On a success, you learn of a signature combat ability they possess, such as any combat traditions they possess, maneuvers, a dragon's breath weapon, or a ranger's fighting style. So this is you essentially taking that sharpness, that ever-present danger, and being like, all right, I'm going to apply this now, and getting a good guesstimate as to whatever creature that you're attacking with, what might their signature thing be. Because again, for you being a Warblade, for you being a fighter on the battlefield, information is information is the name of the battle as well. So you have to. So this war lore idea is taking the idea of that that information that you use is just as valuable as how fast you can swing your sword or how good you can take a hit. And the last one is weapon lore. So this is essentially you get to add your proficiency to intelligence checks to recall lore and gather information about different weapons, armor, and magical or and martial equipment. In addition, you can also basically find a magical weapon or armor and investigate it just by handling it. So this is essentially again kind of getting to the fact of like, hey, I think I might have heard of this in my studies in my tutelage, and getting the feel and the heft of the weapon, making the Warblade feel like a weapon master. Like, because again, that's supposed to make sense. Their whole thing is that they're built upon using weapons to their advantage. And so you can also check about the magical properties, how to use it, if it requires attunement. However, for you DMs out there, they do not learn about the curses that it might have. And you have different DCs depending on what sort of item that you have. So DC 10, uncommon, rare, very rare, legendary, and so on and so forth, like that. Now we get into the fun bit known as the advanced fighting styles. As a master of martial combat, you finally mastered your fighting style unlike any other class. When you reach 6th level, you may choose to replace the fighting style you took at 1st level and get the improved list. I will not go all through all of them, but these essentially add on top of your fighting style that you would get. So, like for example, great weapon fighting. When you roll a 1, 2, or 3 on a damage die with a melee attack you are wielding, you can re-roll it. In addition, if you roll maximum damage, you can push the enemy 10 feet away from you, landing prone. So, the funny thing about this is with Great Weapon Master, because it says roll maximum damage, and it's like, let's say if you roll maximum damage and you crit and you have the felling, I don't know, you have like the felling hammer weapon expertise, those stack. So essentially, not only would you, well, I guess that would also make sense because you would knock them prone and get them advantage, but that would essentially mean you would be able to smack them 15 feet across the floor and then knock them prone. But again, both of those statements have to be true. You have to roll the maximum damage possible on the weapon as well as scoring a critical hit. So just keep stuff like that in mind. And again, we kind of go down. We have like dueling, archery, 2-weapon fighting, and the unarmed fighting. I also forgot to mention, but in the archetypes, not only do folks get different maneuvers, but you also actually gain access to a different fighting style. Mind you, you don't get like an advanced fighting style, as this is supposed to be your main quote unquote weapon that you use, but for different archetypes, you actually get to choose another fighting, or you gain another fighting style from that to again make your character feel more unique. That like, yeah, I have this main way that I fight, but I can also shake it up if I need to. Then for here, you get your martial archetype and you get Indomitable. So Indomitable is essentially when you fail a saving throw. When you just fail any saving throw, you get to choose to succeed instead. So it's basically taking that idea of a legendary action from a creature and just applying it that you can only really just do that once. It's basically that you basically just go, oh man, I failed this saving throw. No, I'm gonna spend a point of Indomitable. No, I don't fail that saving throw. And that just happens. Mind you, again, you can only really use it once, but in addition, you can also choose one of your strength or dexterity based skills, and your proficiency is doubled for any ability check you make for that. So, again, going back into the idea of the skill focus, if you had a skill focus in athletics and you're already proficient with athletics, by 7th level, your proficiency bonus would be a +3. So that'd be +3 times 2, that'd be 6. So that's your proficiency bonus. Let's say that your strength is a 3, so that's 9. And if you get a skill focus, that is 11. That's a +11 to your athletics check, which again is supposed to make sense because your character, there is a clear distinction and a difference between a level 0 soldier and a level 7 fighter, and that is supposed to make that clear distinction of like, no, we are built different. 8th level is when you get your character improvement again, and 9th level is when you get your archetype, but also you get something fun called Combat Incarnate. So Wombat Incarnate essentially has, and I might change this up a little bit, but this is supposed to go back and tie in again with your action surge. But at 9th level, whenever you use a maneuver, you can increase the damage rolled with your weapon by a d8 or improve that maneuver die to a d8. You can only use this feature once, and you expend the use after a long rest, or you can use it by expending your action surge. Well, now you're thinking to yourself like, well, if I already have an action surge, even though I get it back on a short or long rest, I only get one action surge. Why in the flip would I want to spend my Combat Incarnate to use my action surge? Well, I'm glad, and I'll be getting to that very soon because it gets into the really awesome, I think the really awesome level 10 cap that I had for the Warblade. But this is essentially like in a pinch, if you need just something, if you don't think that you can make an extra attack in a pinch, if you just need something a little extra that gives you just enough to push through, this is when you would use your Combat Incarnate. This would be like, nope, I need this one to do much more damage than I need it to do. As such, I add an extra d8 to it, or to whatever maneuver. I need this maneuver to work. I need to spend this Combat Incarnate so I can add another d8 to it. And again, it kind of gets into the idea of like pushing through your limits, breaking what is possible, and kind of getting a little Final Fantasy on it, like breaking your limits. Speaking of breaking your limits, now we get into the fun, as I'm kind of doing a very, very bad drum roll, but now we get into the fun 10th level cap. We have two. We have one called Fighting Focus and another one called Living Legend. So, Fighting Focus. As a bonus action, you can enter a Fighting Focus, and for the next minute, you can attack 3 times instead of twice the first time you take an attack action on your turn. Your Fighting Focus ends early if you are knocked unconscious, or you choose to end it as a free action. You then gain 1 level of exhaustion and cannot use your action surge during that time limit. You can only use this feature once and regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. So again, this lasts for a minute. And this allows you to make 3 attacks instead of 1. Mind you, you might be skipping out on, you're not really skipping out a whole lot even with your action surge, because this is something that doesn't require an expend of your action surge. This is something that just lasts for you for a complete minute. This is you in the zone. This is you hitting your limit break. This is you hitting like your pure adrenaline rush. And again, tying that back into the Combat Incarnate, if you're already in this Fighting Focus and you really need this thing to go down, you have this thing up for a minute, you just pop on your Combat Incarnate on one of your attacks. And once again, you can only use this feature once, and because this is you fighting for such a long time at that intensity, you gain 1 level of exhaustion. Because again, a minute is like, oh yeah, no, a minute is 10 rounds, that's fine, but in realistic terms, quote unquote, you're making 3 attacks every 6 seconds for 10 rounds, so for 60 seconds. So you are burning through a lot of your stamina. You're burning through a lot of your endurance and having your brain working overtime. So yeah, no, you get a level of exhaustion once you end this because that is it's so taxing and it's supposed to be incredibly taxing on your body. But as you know, once you finish up a long rest with exhaustion, especially if it's only one level, you're good. Now, the last one is Living Legend. This ties back into the battle hardened that you got at second level, and this just kind of gives a little bit more flavor to your Warblade. So you have intimidating, which essentially works off of that dangerous aura, which basically you can have your bonus action to intimidate a creature, and they get it. They have to succeed, and if they fail, they are frightened for you for the next minute. So they are frightened of you for 1 minute. Leadership, essentially, you can spend an hour at appropriate locale and you can enlist the aid of people to help you for your cause. Mind you, they may not be obliged to help you, but they will grant easy request and may aid you with complex if given adequate cause or compensation. So this isn't the be all end all, like, I am the leader here and you all tell me what to do. This is more of, how can I get the people on my side? And then mysterious. This kind of gets into like the lone mysterious gunslinger, lone mysterious stranger, et cetera, et cetera. This basically has it where intelligence checks to learn anything about you are made with disadvantage, as well as you have saving throws against divination magic. You are basically, in all words of the, you are a ghost as a legend. You are the mysterious stranger, the 6 billion double dollar man, the living typhoon. Nobody knows who they are. Is just kind of that idea that lives up to you being mysterious and that you were this famous warrior, but that nobody knows anything about. And with that all the way, this kind of gets into the maneuvers, but there's so much stuff here that I will get into maybe a little bit later. But actually, no, I'll just save that for another time. But as we kind of go along with this, I will talk a little bit about the archetypes for it. And I won't do a whole lot of it, but different archetypes. You have the School of the Iron Trigger, which is essentially more of like a gunslinger type. You have the Sword Sage, which is more of like an Eldritch Knight. You have a fun one that I came up with that is something called the Witch Knight, which is more of like a Hexblade Warlock, and kind of has a little bit of ideas and flavor from that. As well as you have other things like School of the Breathing Steel, which is a combination between like a champion archetype and a samurai. Sunomancer is between an Echo Knight and a Psi Knight. And I believe on that note, on my long-winded expenses, I'm going to take a sip of water in a second. That will end my my review, or I suppose that will end my little spiel for anything. So I guess I will, as I've been kind of talking now, my voice is kind of getting a little dry. I will leave it up to folks. I'll give it maybe about a minute, 2 minutes or so to kind of look through to see if anybody has any questions or comments that they want to kind of ask at the moment. I appreciate you all wanting to stick in after hearing me talk for the past almost 2 hours. But now I want to hear from you. I kind of want to hear any of you all have any questions, comments, or concerns. And I can also bring back, and let me do that. Bring back the music. There we go. Oh, okay. That's a very interesting question. Thank you for that. Um, so I guess that's always the thing, right? Like I wanted to design this party role for this fighter or for the Warblade in particular to be something of a, I guess, kind of giving a little bit more of the staying to the fighter's true roots of being a martial Swiss Army knife. Um, Basically having something that has a particular tool for the job. Obviously, they have a couple more things that are a little bit more specialized. For example, depending on whatever type of weapon they use, they get additional bonuses for it in their class. But I wanted to kind of keep that versatility that I really enjoyed for the fighter. And again, I think the fighter in this rendition is the more, I mean, obviously, like, you have the warlock, who is already very modular by their nature, but I wanted to keep that very Swiss Army multi-tool idea for the fighter, but without having them need to juggle between different weapons, so to speak. They have like their signature weapon, they have their signature way of defending themselves, their fighting styles, and that's it. For party roles in general, I have them more as defenders, more in the idea of like making sure that they keep other people safe, and as offensive, essentially trying to deal as much damage as I can to their to a particular creature. There are some archetypes that do have they do have some archetypes that have a bit more support, and there are actually maneuvers that have a bit more of a supporting role to them. Are you planning to have firearms have any sort of penetration against armor, or just extra spell-like damage? That's a great question. I think I haven't decided what I wanted to do with that just yet. I think what I wanted to do was have that less in the weapon itself and more of like a modification. That people oh man, a touch. Ooh, no, because there's I don't want to spoil it too much, but there is a system that I have in here that well, I guess I'll talk about this. The reason I thought about Touch AC, but the reason why I didn't was because there is already a rule in place that I kind of took from the dungeon dudes, or actually I can't remember who I took this from, but essentially, if you exceed your targets, or if you exceed a creature's AC by 10 or more, you deal an additional weapon die of damage. So it's not necessarily the weapon in itself that does like a whole lot of damage, but rather the system, the mechanic in place that does it. That being said, the penetration, I think I have an idea of either you can get a module, like a firearm modification, where you can get maybe like a bullet or like a specific type of chamber or a specific type of barrel for your firearm that allows you to maybe like once per turn you're able to or maybe just like a weapon enchant once per turn, or you spend a charge and you are able to hit your opponent's AC, and as if it was like 5, AC -5 or something like that. But again, because of how this extra damage system is put in place, I would have to be pretty careful with that. That would probably have to be an enchantment that has maybe 2 charges max, because I could see somebody like heavily exploiting that. Succeed by 10 plus. Damn, what's the baseline? Well, the baseline for a good modifier for an attack, it would be the AC, right? So so no matter what, an attack roll is still going to be the proficiency bonus plus the plus whatever ability score increase that you use for the proficiency bonus plus whatever ability score that you use for your weapon. And the reason why I say like the baseline of a good modifier is that, well, there have been and this is again kind of like the fun instance where like there have been instances where people have rolled like, you know, they may have a +5 to their modifier or whatever, but they roll like an 18. You know, that's a 23, and they hit a goblin that has an AC of 13. So it happens, and especially kind of getting into the play of like how advantage sort of happens, where like advantage becomes a much bigger thing. We're like, no, if a creature has advantage on you, or you have an advantage on a creature, that could slowly turn into a very dangerous like game of rocket tag, where if the advantage already theoretically nets a +5, you know, in theory nets a +5 bonus to whatever roll you're making, then that already boosts what you're going to be doing. So this is again for like more like just for like different effects that kind of happen. This normally doesn't happen, and even when you score a critical hit, this massive hit, the exceeding the AC by 10 or 10 or more, that does not count into it. The critical hit is a critical hit. A massive hit is a massive hit. They do not intermingle at all. As rules is written, canon, they cannot mingle, because if they do, that gets stupidly broken really quickly. Oh man, that's always the thing. That's like, I never realized how hoarse my voice was gonna get after doing all of this. Because I was like, wow, I sure was just talking a whole lot about everything for like. No, man, it's all good. It's all good. Like I said, I wanted to kind of do this just to kind of get a little bit more engagement. Again, I apologize because I'm still trying to make sure I get everything together and kind of how I want this all to work out. But, you know, I just want to thank each and every one of you all for your support in all of this. I'm so glad that everybody was able to hop on. You know, everybody was able to kind of look and see and just kind of get a, you know, just enjoy my little corner of the universe and kind of get to hear the fun stuff that's coming out of my brain. And I suppose on that note, as a good streamer, I should, I guess, recommend somebody to raid, but unfortunately, I don't know off the top of my head if there is somebody currently live streaming anything that I can think of. So, hitting at the 158 mark here, I think that'll do it for us. So, once again, thank you everybody for tuning in to my first ever live stream. This was scary, but this was definitely a lot of fun. I learned a lot, and I hope to improve more upon this as things kind of go on. Yeah, thank you so much everybody for showing up. And as always, if you want to stay up to date with everything, you can go ahead and find us on our Twitter at agents_of_boo. And no matter what, as always, stay golden, everybody. And I love you and take care. Have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.